Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. On the question of German hesitancy here, let's listen to a clip from Lloyd Austin. This is a press conference on Friday at Ramstein Air Base, and he was asked whether Germany is still a reliable ally.
They are a reliable ally, and they've been that way for a very, very long time, and I truly believe that they'll continue to be a reliable ally going forward. Not to mention, they have Germany is host to 39,000 of my troops and their families, and also 10,000 civilians here. And so we've had a great relationship throughout over the years, and I will continue to have that great relationship. And Germany will continue to exercise leadership going forward.
Joe, do you have an explanation for what's going on in the German allies' minds here? I mean, my understanding is that support for Ukraine within the country is pretty broad and includes even some of the political parties that you would not expect.
Yes, I think that it's important when we have this discussion to sort of talk about two different things. You can talk about Germany writ large, and then you have to talk about Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And I increasingly think that the problem is Chancellor Scholz specifically, because if you look at the debates that are going on within Berlin, within Germany on these issues in the past couple of weeks, and even since the Ukraine war began nearly a year ago, there has been a very rapid, very radical transformation in German politics. It used to be very pacifist. It used to be that something like sending lethal weapons into a conflict zone was a bright red line. Well, they crossed that line long ago, even though they're still nattering about the specific issue of the Leopard tanks. I think that there have been a lot of very rapid changes in the way that German voters and politicians think about the relationship with Russia. This is very broad-based. You're seeing it in the CDU party, the main center-right party, which was Angela Merkel's party when she was chancellor for 16 years. You see it in the Green Party, which historically was very pacifist, but has now become very hawkish on Russia. One of the leading proponents of sending the Leopard tanks is Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock of the Green Party. So, I mean, across the political spectrum, and even within the Social Democrats of Chancellor Olaf Scholz, you have a wing that is in favor of these tank shipments and a much more hawkish policy toward Russia more generally. I think the specific problem that they have is that Olaf Scholz is the chancellor. The SPD, his party, the Social Democrats, remain deeply divided on the Russia issue, and so he has a party management problem. And then he also has a very lead from behind political style. So I think that one of the specific problems that emerges with the tank issue or the arming Ukraine is that there is a fear in Germany that doing this might be escalatory, that it might provoke Putin to some kind of counterattack directly on NATO that would then embroil Germany in a much larger conflict that I don't think anyone inside or outside Germany wants. Now, the thing is that public opinion on this is very capable of being changed by political leadership. And I think that if Olaf Scholz would get in front of the cameras and give a speech saying, you know what, we are NATO members, we believe in the deterrence of NATO, we are not afraid of what the Russians might do if we provide this military aid to Ukraine, voters might respond to that. But Scholz's political style is not to demonstrate that kind of leadership. And so he ends up getting himself stuck in this inertia that then is very embarrassing for him within Germany, where people want him to do more. And it's also very embarrassing for him among Germany's allies in NATO.
And that German hesitancy, I think, also fuels the American view that why is the U.S. footing the bill for this war that is happening in Europe's backyard, in Germany's backyard? And it's not that there's no point to that argument, though I'm not sure that it's convincing either, given U.S. interests. I mean, Kim, the argument is that the best way to end the war is to give Ukraine the supplies that it needs in order to win. And as you pointed out, I mean, the Institute for the Study of War said on Monday, here's their assessment: Ukrainian intelligence assessed that Russian forces are preparing for an offensive effort in the spring or early summer of 2023, and that there may be some decisive action. And so, Kim, I mean, the way that I think you have to think about it is it in the U.S.'s interest, in NATO's interest, that that Russian offensive be successful, that it be stalled, but that this conflict gets bogged down into a frozen stalemate, or that the Ukrainians can repel and eventually push back those Russian lines.
Absolutely. And Americans need to remember again, too, that the Ukrainians are the ones doing the fighting. Yes, we are giving money, we are giving supplies. But if Putin were allowed to rampage across Ukraine and potentially try to take even more land or invade a NATO country, then it would potentially be Americans who were doing the fighting. And so we need to continue to do all we can to help Ukraine emerge victorious from this. And this is why it's such a pity that Germany is allowing this argument to exist that the Europeans aren't doing enough, because it's not really true. Even within Europe, and Joe hinted at this, there's a great deal of frustration across nearly every other country that Germany is being so difficult about this. And you see them moving to move without Germany. You know, we had Britain say that it is sending 14 of its Challenger tanks. French President Emmanuel Macron has suggested they may send Leclerc tanks. You had recently 9 European countries sign the Tallinn Pledge, deepening their support to Ukraine's victory in this war, and they ranged signatories to that, everyone from the United Kingdom, Estonia, Poland, Denmark, Slovakia. I mean, a lot of really key members of the European Union. You've also got European members that are beginning to take more seriously the reality that we are at the end of that infamous peace dividend, and that they need to boost their defense spending and get ready for things that are yet to come. Macron recently said that they're going to boost their defense spending significantly. Other European countries have said that. And then here's Berlin. It's not even clear that it's going to meet its NATO commitment of 2% of its economy on defense spending. So the issue here, as Joe really said, is Germany. And hopefully America can understand that that is a very different question than what's happening across most of the rest of Europe.
That realignment, though, is something to watch. I mean, the Reuters story on the French military budget says that President Emmanuel Macron wants to increase it by 1/3. This is a 2024 to 2030 budget. And if that comes true, then France's military budget would have doubled since Emmanuel Macron took power in 2017. Japan, on the other side of the world, seems also to have woken up to the end of the peace dividend. It's talking about increasing its military defense spending to 2% of the economy. And as the Journal notes in a recent editorial, given the size of Japan's economy, 2% would mean that it could have the third largest military budget in the world. And so, Joe, I mean, I think this is a trend that bears watching. Of course, it's one thing to announce a budget and another thing to actually get the budget passed through the legislature and signed into law. But I think there are a lot of world leaders outside of Germany who have seen the Ukraine conflict and woken up to the idea that, you know, this could be in their backyard next year. If you're in Japan, I mean, this could be Taiwan in 5 years or 2.
Absolutely. I mean, the famous phrase in German politics, I think it was a foreign minister in the 1990s after the fall of the Berlin Wall and German reunification and the end of the Cold War, who said that, you know, Germany was now surrounded only by friends. And I think that that kind of captures a view. Not just Germany thought that, a lot of people thought that we were enjoying this peace dividend, that we no longer had to worry about external threats. And I think that the past year has brought a real wake-up call in a lot of parts of the world, and an understanding that Russia is not the only threat, that China also is a competitor, a strategic rival that we need to be much more aware of. That's what's motivating what's happening in Japan. I do think, though, that it's important to understand this military spending, these pledges, as a process that will take many years to unfold, rather than a switch that is going to flip and then it'll just be on. Because certainly the experience in a lot of places has been that committing to spend the money is actually the easy part. You then get into the question of what you're going to spend the money on. And actually, Germany provides a good example of this, because nearly a year ago, Chancellor Scholz promise that Germany would now meet its 2% of GDP military spending target within NATO, and would also create a special fund of 100 billion euros to spend on hardware upgrades, including the F-35 jet. And ever since then, the problem has become a big food fight about what that money is going to be spent on exactly, and how it can be spent efficiently on things that will actually bolster the country's capabilities within NATO. And so I think that when you look at the spending pledges from countries like Japan or France, the thing that we're going to have to watch like a hawk over the next few years is, are they focusing their spending on projects that can deliver real returns, real hardware, real capabilities, real fast? Or are they going to pour money into, I think the French are among those who have a habit of pouring money into very expensive nationalist industrial policy projects that don't end up really paying off in the end. So I think that the promise to spend is the necessary first step, but it's not going to be sufficient over the longer term. Now we're going to have to hold their feet to the fire in terms of what they spend on.
Thank you, Joan Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.